Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create an aged grunge poster effect in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions I need to get out of the way right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2018. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. So if you're using a Mac, when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that means hit the Option key. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up the new image dialog box. Let's name this Aged Grunge Poster, because that's what we're going to make. Width is going to be 3,840 pixels, height of 2,160 pixels, resolution 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit, background doesn't matter, we're going to be covering that anyway. Our color profile is sRGB, and our pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. Hit create, and we are ready to begin. Now, I have a link in the description below to all of the resources that I'll be using, the images, the photo, and the font. So feel free to download those now in order to follow along with this tutorial. Otherwise, you can use any font you want and any image that you want. I would suggest that you use an image that has one single focal point that you want to use this effect on. Okay, so let's bring in our background texture, which is going to be a paperish texture. Okay, so bring that in and resize it to fill your screen, hit enter, and you now have your background image. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that when I bring in images and photos, I am using a preference here under my general, under edit preferences general, where I always create smart objects when placing. And that is why my paper that I just brought in, the paper texture, is a smart object already. If you don't have that set and you don't want to set that in your options, you can then just right click on the layer that is your background texture and then convert it into a smart object. Okay, now we no longer need this background color, so we could throw that away. And now what we want to do on our background texture is we want to desaturate that right away. So you want to hit Control U on the keyboard to bring up your hue saturation adjustment. Okay, and you want to go down to saturation, bring that all the way to 0. That will desaturate, take out all the color. And then we want to brighten it up because it needs to be slightly brighter than normal for this effect to look its best. So we want to make this at, let's say, 50%. Okay, depending on the background texture that you choose, you may need to adjust this, but what you're looking for is something of about this brightness. Okay, hit OK, and as you can see, since it's a smart object, we now have a smart filter of that hue saturation layer. The next thing that we need to do is bring in our actual photo, and I'm using this photo right here of this guy on a motorcycle. So we're going to resize that again to fill our screen, and we're just going to move it around until it sits in the frame where we want it to be, and then we hit enter. And again, you want this to be a smart object, so if you don't have the option in your preferences to make all your photos that you import into smart objects, just right click and go to convert to smart object. Okay, once you have that, what we want to do is make two copies so that we have 3 layers of the exact same thing. And you do that by selecting the layer and then hit Control J twice to make 3 copies. Then you want to rename them so that you know what they are. The top one you want to name masked. Okay, the middle one here you want to name cutout. And the bottom one here you want to name spatter. Okay, then what we want to do is we're going to do a little bit of effects to each of these 3. Okay, so we're going to hide the top 2 so that we can work on just the bottom one first. Okay, on the bottom one, what we want to do first is we want to change its layer mode here to hard light, like so, and then we want to change its opacity to 30%. And this already looks pretty cool, but we're going to make it look even better. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we need to apply some filter gallery filters to this. So we're going to go up here to filter gallery, and then we're going to get these filter gallery filters. Now, I've already got it set up here, but if you only see one thing on your filter layers, okay, in order to make 4, just go down here and say new effect layer, hit that 3 times, and then you will have 4 to choose from. Now, the bottom one that you want is going to be cutout. Now, cutout can be found here under artistic and cutout. Okay, and the number of levels that we want here is 8, edge simplicity is 8, and edge fidelity is 3. Now, let me show you what that will actually do here. Okay, so this is what it will look like. Okay, it gives us this nice blocky and solid color look to the image. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is accented edges here, and accented edges can be found under brush strokes. Accented edges is the very first one, and the edge width that we're looking for is 2, edge brightness is 29, smoothness is 5. And then what we want, the next one up, is going to be grain. Grain can be found here under texture, and it's grain, and that will give us this little bit of grain, which is intensity of 30, contrast of 50, and grain type is contrasty. Okay, the last one that we want, the topmost one, is going to be spatter. Okay, and spatter can be found under brush strokes, spatter right here, and the spray radius is 20, and the smoothness is 4. We're going to hit OK, and we now have this kind of cool looking effect. The next thing that we want to do is we want to turn on our cutout layer, so turn that guy on. Okay, then what we want to do is we want to change this layer mode here to vivid light, like so. Okay, and then what we want to do is make our opacity here only 30% also, like that. And you can see it's already looking pretty cool. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to give this some smart filters, the same smart filters basically as what we've already put on our spatter layer. Okay, so we're going to go up here to filter, we're going to go to filter gallery, and here you can see it's already set up with the same 4 filters, and that's because Photoshop remembers what you've done, and it just automatically assumes you want to do the same thing. And in this case, this particular case, we do, except what we don't want is spatter, so we can turn that off, and grain, so we can turn that off. All we want is accented edges and cutout. And then we can hit OK. We don't have to change any options. They stay exactly the same as they were. And we just hit OK, and now we have this look, which is, again, pretty cool. But wait, there's more. Then we're going to unhide our mask layer. Okay, and what we're going to do over here is we're going to go to our mask layer, and we're going to make this layer mode of linear light, which is right here. And then what we're going to do is change our opacity to only 30%. But wait, we don't really want it to be 30% or linear light yet. That's something that we want to do after we have cut out this main subject. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to normal, and we're going to make our opacity 100% again, okay? And then we're going to cut out our main subject, all right? Now, our main subject needs to be cut out in a sloppy fashion. Yes, I know normally you want to cut things out perfectly, and you want to use, say, the pen tool, and you want to make sure that you get every little piece perfectly cut out so that you can put it anywhere you want, but not this time. This time we want it to be sloppy so that it has that grungy look. All right, so you don't need to be very precise with this, which is why I'm going to say to use the quick selection tool. Okay, so you can select that by hitting W on the keyboard, or by going over here to your quick selection tool and making sure that you're there. And then what you want to do is make sure that up here under the options you have the little plus symbol so that you can just add more selections, and make sure sample all layers is unchecked. And then just start selecting. And make sure you get as much of it as you can. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, like I said. You just want to get all the important pieces, which is basically the whole thing, but you don't have to be perfect. Okay, as you can see, I'm really not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to get as much of it as I can. See, I got the back wheel here. I got all of the 27, the main focus part of this. See, I just did too much on the outside, and I've got this shadow down here at the bottom. So I'm going to get rid of this shadow down here, and the way that you do that is you just hold down Alt on the keyboard, which will turn this into take away or a minus, and then you just start deselecting the areas that you don't want. So now I've deselected the shadow, and you can see it's rough down here at the bottom where the wheel is. Doesn't really matter. I could leave that, or I could select it and then deselect some more. I don't need it to be perfect. Okay, but I don't want the blue sky. So I'm going to hold down Alt again, and then I'm going to select this blue sky to get rid of it, like so. And that looks pretty good. All right, oop, too much. Put that back in. Then I want to get rid of this, like so, and get rid of this, like so, and there we go. We now have a rough estimate of our guy, right? Which is all that we really need to do. All right, then what we want to do over here under mask, because it's masked, we just want to make a mask of this layer. So since we have selected what we want to keep, you can go down here to your add layer mask button, click on that, and you now have cut away everything except for our main subject. And you can see that we still have the dirt here. Let me go back to my move tool, V on the keyboard, and you can see inside his wheel we still have the dirt from behind his wheel, and you can still see some blue sky over here and behind his head. We don't care. It's a rough cutout. That's perfect for what we're trying to accomplish here. So now that we have this done, now we can go over here to our layer mode and we can change this to linear light. And then we can change our opacity here to 30%. Now that we have done that, all that we need to do is we want to copy our layer style, our smart filters again. So we want to go up here to our filter and to filter gallery. Okay, and you can see we have the same 4 things here. We haven't gotten rid of anything. So what we want to do is we don't want spatter, but we do want grain. So we want to put back in grain. Then we want to hit OK. Okay, and now we've got this cool look, but it's not quite what we want. What we want to do is we want to move the cutout so that it is slightly offset from our background too. Our mask layer needs to be slightly offset from our cutout and spatter layers. They are the whole background. This is just our masked out main subject. And that will make our image look pretty darn cool like so. Now that might be a little bit too much for you, so you can use the arrow keys as long as you're in the move tool to really select exactly where you want it to be, like so. And you can see that it makes this look really interesting to the eye. Now the last thing that we want to do is we want to put some text over here on the left of this particular image, or if you have a different image that you're working with, wherever you want that text to be. Now you can use any font that you want. I happen to be using a font that is called Cherry Jam. Okay, so let's start putting that in. Let's go to our text tool, which is T on the keyboard. Okay, and let's go out to our character palette. Now, if you don't see that, just go here to Window and go to Character, and it will pop up. And then, like I said, I'm using Cherry Jam at 200 points. All caps for me. You can use whatever you want. And the color that I'm using is going to be a nice blue color that's kind of like the sky up here, okay? So the color that I'm using is 009 CB0. Okay, so this kind of bluish look here. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to start typing. So let's go with Pixel and Magic, like so. All right, so now I've got in my text and I'm going to hit V on my keyboard so that I can move my text where I want it to be. All right, the next thing that I need to do is I need to change this layer mode for my text to be multiply, like so. And you can see that now it's gotten a little bit darker. And then what I want to do is I want to change the opacity here. Not the opacity. I want to change the layer fill to 50%. Okay, and now I can see some of the grain of our texture, our paper texture, behind our font. Okay, then what we want to do to really make this font tie in with the rest of the poster, we want to offset it slightly. So we need a copy of this layer. So let's hit Control J on the keyboard to get a copy of that layer. Okay, then what we want to do is change our layer mode to vivid light. So let's go down here to vivid light. Then what we want to do is change our fill here to 55% so that it's a little bit darker. And then we're going to change the color. Nothing else is going to change. The color, though, will change. And we're going to change that to, let's say, 940, a nice red color, E16. Okay, this nice red color. Going to hit OK, and we now have that. So now this top layer, you want to have your move tool, so that's V on the keyboard, and you want to just move this with your arrow keys up and to the left a little bit. So I'm going to say let's start with 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that looks pretty cool to me, so let's keep that. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. And once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.